Hi everyone, welcome back to Coffee Books and Rain, where I've got one more book that I'm going to talk to you guys about on this particular round of books. And y'all are seeing these out of order, so you're probably like, what are you talking about? I'm watching you out of order. And yes, you are. Yes, you are. This one is probably showing up in January, so I'm still wearing ears because it's recorded in December. Um, you're welcome. You're welcome for the still festive vibes. Um, and the penguin. The penguin is reppin'. But this book, I felt like it was a great winter vibe because it takes place in Iceland. And my puppy is laying on the bed having the best time as he is like rubbing his face and making little grr noises. It's so cute. I don't know what he wants except for attention, but it's adorable. Hey, buddy. Hey, buddy. I did actually, in fact, get a new tattoo of my boys. So this one's Argos and this one's Leo. So just showing you, it's a terrible angle, but there you go, if you can kind of see them. But just got a new tattoo. It's been 2 weeks now, 2 weeks tomorrow that I had just got this. So very pleased. It is no longer in any sort of like itchy phase or anything, but I'm keeping it hydrated um, as appropriately said by my artist. So she did a phenomenal job, and I will probably be working with her in, I want to say, early spring. So that way, when it comes to summer and swimsuit season, I will be fully healed and able to slather that sunscreen on really, really well. So that way, there is no sun damage as long as I can cover it with sunscreen. But you don't want to do that if it's still healing. So one, don't smudge it, and two, don't cover it in like chemicals like that. Note to self, I have about 14. But we are talking about The Lost House by Melissa Larsen. Now, this book is expected to be released on January 14th of 2025, and it is approximately 352 pages. Now, I want to say that this one, yes, I had this one. I was going to say at first I was going to say an ebook, but I didn't have it as an ebook. I have it as an audiobook on my NetGalley. So I just actually finished it earlier today, so I'm down to my last, I think it's like 2 minutes maybe. So I've already figured out what happened, but I was like, well, I'm already recording, so I might as well go ahead and record this one because all the things have happened, and so I'm now down to the last 2 minutes. And so I don't think I need to listen to the last 2 minutes to be able to record and tell you guys what I think. Now, I give this book a solid 4 stars. There were a couple of moments throughout the book that I was just a little frustrated with the main character, Agnes. But there are points where she does frustrating things. And also being in Iceland, in a land where she does not speak the language, I don't think that's so frustrating for me, but it is where her grandfather is from and where her father is from. And she has gone back to Iceland in order to try to figure out a little bit more about something that happened to, her grandmother and her aunt, so her infant aunt, were killed when they were younger. So I think her grandmother was about 26, so Agnes never knew her. Her dad was, what did they say? Gosh, like 9. So it was like 40 years prior. I think that's kind of the timeline. But let's just dive into the summary real quick and we'll go from there. Because again, this is a mystery thriller. It is suspense with a little bit of crime. And again, I give it 4 stars. I think I was pretty intrigued along the way. I was just a little frustrated with some of maybe it's the writing style. But that was more, maybe it was stylistic for me. We'll go into it from there. Yeah. 40 years ago, a young woman and her infant daughter were found buried in the cold Icelandic snow, lying together as peacefully as those sleeping, except the mother's throat had been slashed and the infant drowned. The case was never solved. There were no arrests, no conviction. Just a suspicion turned into the husband did it. When he took his son and fled halfway across the world to California, it was proof enough of his guilt. Now, half a century later and a year after his death, his granddaughter Agnes is ready to clear her grandfather's name once and for all. Still recovering from his death and devastating injury, Agnes wants nothing more than an excuse to escape the shambles of her once stable life. Which is why she so readily accepts true crime expert Nora Carver's invitation to be interviewed for her popular podcast. Nora packs a bag and hops on a last-minute flight to the remote town of Bifrost, Iceland, where Nora is staying, where Agnes's father grew up, and where, supposedly, her grandfather slaughtered his wife and infant daughter. It is merely coincidence that a local girl goes missing the very same weekend Agnes arrives, or is it? Suddenly, Agnes and Nora's investigation is turned upside down, and everyone in the small Icelandic village is once again a suspect, seeking to unearth old and new truths alike. Agnes finds herself drawn into a web of secrets that threatens the redemption she is hell-bent on delivering, and even her life, discovering how far a person will go to protect their family, their safety, and their secrets. Set against an unforgiving Icelandic winter, The Lost House is a chilling, razor-sharp thriller packed with jaw-dropping twists that will leave you breathless. So, I'm not going to say I thought they were jaw-dropping thrillers or jaw-dropping twists, but I thought atmospherically it was perfect for the season. Again, it's cold. In my perspective, it's cold here, so reading a book where everything is pretty frigid and snow-covered felt perfect for coming close to the end of December. I thought, man, I would have loved if there had been snow piled outside, but Alabama does not get snow piled outside of anywhere, really. I would have to travel much further north in order to have that happen. I could picture the snow like falling and this beautiful like white almost landscape. And she even describes it as she's looking out at the window of like the cabin she's staying in as being almost this lunar landscape. So I can only picture like, the sun does not always, when you're so close to the Arctic Circle, the sun does not fully rise completely sometimes in certain parts of the year. So she only gets maybe 7-ish hours of light. Some parts it's almost twilight for a good chunk of the day. And it felt as though it was just kind of cold and a really good setting atmospherically for all of this to go down. So in that sort of way, I was intrigued. But Agnes herself, I don't know. There's a part of that for me that I was a little frustrated with. I feel like I've read a lot of books where a main character who's dealing with personal trauma decides to dive into more personal trauma at like the exactly wrong time. And I don't know if it's supposed to, like, I don't know if it's supposed to elicit some sort of, like, empathy or something within me, but it really didn't. I was just like, girl, okay, you lost your grandfather about a year ago. You've suffered this really, like, about a year ago, this accident, which seems to have shattered your ankle and your knee. Which you are still suffering from opioid addiction because you think you're going to go cold turkey, and I don't think that's going to happen. And it definitely doesn't, because she is still struggling with it like constantly. And everything just feels like it's the wrong moment for her to do this. So it feels very impulsive. And on top of that, her dad does not really support her. I'm not saying she needs her dad's support. I'm saying she can do whatever she wants as a grown adult. Absolutely, with 100%. But I also don't think it's the right time for her to be doing this. I think she feels like she's got to prove something to herself, and that's where it feels self-destructive. That's my personal thoughts on Agnes as a character. This just feels kind of self-destructive when we kind of first meet Agnes, because it's, I don't know if she's, at one point she does kind of make a point in talking to Nora, this podcast person, that she wants to kind of prove, like, she wants to tell people he was innocent. She wants people to just kind of, understand that he, he had to flee. Like, people thought he was guilty, and so he had to leave his home. He could never return. The home he loved and grew up with and all this sort of stuff was a place he could never come back to, and it was taken from him. So it was taken from her and her family because they too were never able to return. So I think that was something that she thought struck a chord with her, which does make a lot of sense. Because even though it's 40 years later in this particular town, the memory is still very, very alive in people's minds. And so when Agnes arrives in Iceland, pretty much like that very weekend before, like, I don't know if she like arrives on a Monday, that Saturday before she got there, there was a house party at her grandfather's old house, which is weird, and a girl went missing who was like this starkly white blonde hair girl who was fairly young, who seems to almost have some similarities to her grandmother, but not in ways of looks. Now, Agnes, on the other hand, seems to look a lot like her grandmother, and people are very vocal about telling her that. They're like, oh, you're like a spitting image of her. Oh, I thought I saw a ghost. You look just like her, sort of thing. But Agnes is here with the hopes to try to prove her grandfather's innocence. And I'm not going to try to get into like the last half of the book or get into spoilers about how everything plays out. But I kind of wanted to go into that part because, again, I do think that this is a 4-star book. It's not perfect by any means. It's definitely one that you've kind of got to forgive a little bit. Some of the characters are just very blunt and brusque and short-worded, and I didn't know if the author just didn't know what to write for them, or I was like, why are we trying to have a conversation with someone who's not actually having a conversation? He's just like one wording everything. So it felt, I don't know, it felt like talking to a brick wall sometimes when I was encountering those conversations. That was a bit frustrating. Some characters were really good, like the conversations between her and Nora. Although Nora seemed a bit fangirlish about it at times, because we do find out that Nora has this particular case of Agnes's grandmother and aunt was like the case that made Nora want to become like this true crime podcasting host. And so so that's also a little sketchy as well in a lot of different ways, because you just know that Nora is out there just absolutely fangirling over this, but Agnes just really wants to try to get answers. And in another way, she also wants to prove her grandfather innocent, but you can't do both at the same time. You either want to prove your grandfather's innocent or you want to find the truth. You have, and like, the thing is, this bias is going to show, and Nora does say that too. It's like she tries not to make her opinion known because bias will show when she's presenting in a podcast. And that is so very true. I mean, this is a book review channel. My bias shows when I bring a book to you guys, and I'm like, well, I don't bring you guys anything that I don't at least give a 4 star to, right? So pretty much if I'm talking about it, I'm going to give it 4 stars when I rate it on Goodreads or on NetGalley. So that right there is already going to give you some level of bias of saying, hey, I liked it. I don't bring to you guys, don't present books that I am not going to give those sort of ratings to. And I've had a few this month that I have had to put aside because they just were not working for me. But am I going to bring them up for you guys to understand that I didn't give them very good reviews? Probably not. I don't want to taint your thoughts if you happen to run across them and then you be like, oh, that one girl didn't like this book, so maybe I won't read it either. I don't want you to do that. I would rather you make your own thoughts about it, because anytime I pick up a book on NetGalley, that's why I don't read the summaries, and that's often why I don't look at the star ratings on Goodreads or NetGalley either. I want to be fully honest in my own thoughts and in my own reaction to what it is when I read it. So that's why sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. But 90% of the time, maybe even higher than that percentage wise, they do work for me. But I'm also attempting to mitigate my exposure to people who may have had different experiences than I did. And so I get it with regards to Nora, who's really doing her best to present this true crime podcast from a perspective of as unbiased as possible. However, everyone has bias. There is no truly unbiased. Like, like there's almost no way to really do that. But anyway, I think we have covered as much as I feel comfortable telling you guys without going into spoilers, so I'm going to leave it there. If you're interested, I hope you'll go out and find it. I thought it was really good and perfect for the wintry season. Like I said, lots of snow and ice, lots of cold and wintry references, and a couple of bodies or two buried in the snow. I'm just saying. But I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in, for liking, and I hope you'll subscribe and stick around. I will see you guys on the next page. And as we move into the new year, I hope your 2025 turns out pretty awesome. Have a great one. Bye.